Tonight, we have the original SAS action thriller author, whose latest book, Some Unholy War, has been described as breathless entertainment by The Guardian. After a 4-year wait, he's back, and he's better than ever. I'm about to talk to Terence Strong. Terence Strong, lovely to see you.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you for coming out. You're here today to talk about your latest book, Some Unholy War. This is just the latest story to add to your back catalogue of Special Forces thrillers. So, how did it all start for you in terms of writing?
When I was 11, I wrote my first book. Well, I thought I'd written a book. In fact, it was only 16 pages,
Okay.
but it was a book to me.
That is a book.
It was a complete rip-off of Biggles, the flying hero of some of our youths, anyway.
Okay.
And I had a friend whose father was a publisher,
Yeah.
who very kindly, he's only just died very, very recently, in his 90s, and he very kindly took the time out with a blue pen to write and scrawl all over my 16 pages. It should have put me off writing for life, but it was an epiphany moment, and it just set me on the road to writing.
You mentioned you started when you were 11. So growing up in post-war Britain as a child, you didn't have the luxuries of a child today in terms of broad entertainment. What aspects of growing up and using your imagination helped you develop the skills needed to become the successful author that you are today?
Just in general, as you say, you didn't have much to play. I had a puppet theatre, a marionette theatre that my dad put together for me.
Wow.
And so that was a bit of a start. And we also, although we didn't have cameras and films, we did have tape recorders, and sound plays were very sort of popular at that time. So I think really the early stages was putting together plays in a marionette theatre and doing plays, radio type plays, on a tape recorder for friends and family.
Yeah. Now, authors have different styles of research. You've used many different methods when writing your books, both on the ground research, reading books, newspapers, and of course, trawling the internet. Is there a particular technique you prefer, and if there is, why?
They all have their place. In the old days, you'd have a very famous adventure thriller writers, which I suppose I'm in that sort of category, like Hammond Innes, who would go out and do exciting things. And on the other end of the spectrum, you had Desmond Bagley, who made it almost a point of doing everything by research and never going anywhere. Well, in his early days anyway, that was the story. No, it's really nice to actually go to some of these places. And other times, if I'm not going somewhere, I will read an awful lot about it, maybe 7 or 9 books.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't actually go to China when I wrote Deadwater Deep. And I think if I had gone to China on that one, I might have had almost too much information.
Yeah.
So that worked out very well. But I did have a lady, my man in China, who was, she used to send me drunken emails every night, if you could have a drunken email.
Yeah.
I'd send her off to a hotel to do some research, tell me what
Okay.
it was like, or this or that, and she was very good. She was a member of the Crime Writers Association. I better not mention her name.
No, that's absolutely fine. That's great. So it sounds very interesting. So are you, in a way, you're kind of pleased you didn't go to China?
As it turned out, I was, yes, because that was only part of the book. There was also an awful lot on the naval side, which involved inventing a stealth submarine. So I used some people from Vickers and an engineer who'd been in the submarine service all his life.
Wow.
And together we cobbled together what would have been a real and effective mini stealth submarine, which is part of the book.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. Do you think there's such a thing as too much research?
Yes. You know, it's much
Yeah.
easier to do the cheating that you guys do in films. Make it up. It's you can just not worry about it too much.
Okay.
Just invent a village, invent.
Mm.
And sometimes you actually have to do that, because when I wrote the book on Bosnia, which is called Wheels of Fire, because there were only certain routes into Bosnia run by the convoys, it was far too easy to identify where it would be, which it can upset people, and it could open you to being sued. So we invented a complete town.
Wow.
Well, it had to be somewhere.
Yeah, of course.
But you'd really have to go some to actually work it out.
Yeah.
But what it did do was reflect Bosnia in a way that non-fiction couldn't.
So with the new technology of ebooks, has your previous work seen a boost in sales and popularity?
Yes, everybody's has. It has taken the publishing industry by surprise. Everyone said, and we all say it, we want real books, we don't want all these technical things. But it's taken off and people love it. And everybody's backlist is picking up. And of course you've got newbie authors coming, independents coming along as well.
Yeah, so if you're like a newbie and a independent author, you sometimes give your books away for free.
Not from me, yes.
No.
On the basis that authors have to eat too, you know.
Yes, of course, yeah. I'd imagine J.K. Rowling, she probably could do a free book now.
I would imagine she could. She could probably afford to feed herself and half the population as well, which is lovely. Well done her.
Yeah.
Yes, what J.K. has done is actually bring children back into reading again, because I think a lot of children have almost forgotten how to.
Yeah, it was actually the first book that really got me into reading. First book I finished, proper book.
It's time, Simon, for you to move on.
Yeah.
What do you have?
And I have moved on to Some Unholy War by Terence Strong. So when you were researching White Viper, you found yourself in Colombia. This trip seems like a particularly adrenaline-fueled experience involving bombs and single propeller planes in the Andes. You've also mentioned before about being stranded in the Amazon. That sounds like a hell of a trip. Please, can you tell us more?
Yeah, well, yes, I was following a true story when I went down into the Amazon, and one thing I promised myself was not to fly in the afternoons when the thermals are at their worst in the Amazon jungle, and certainly not to fly in any single-engined aircraft. I managed to do both, because it was the only way out at the time.
Okay.
Bombs have gone off because the guerrillas are always playing around out there. We'd heard that. Then suddenly there was an escape plan made, which involved a local policeman in his aircraft. And the aircraft actually takes off running down the side of a mountain. And then up. And I'm sitting there holding the door closed because there was something wrong with the fastening. And we're overloaded with 5 people in it. I've got a machete on my lap facing the wrong way. And we took off. But in fact, it was the taxi driver at the other end that nearly killed me. Because I've never had to grab a taxi driver's wheel before and turn him from the juggernaut that was coming the other way.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, and then getting lost in the jungle.
No way.
It was a 6-hour trip that took 8 hours. And when I got to the other end, the car that was supposed to meet me and take me to the hotel had given up. And there was no telephones or anything. It was before the days of mobile phones, really.
Yeah. 6 hours and it took 8. That sounds like normal traffic in London at rush hour. So I know.
I had just managed to learn Spanish. Well, when I say I learnt it in a month, I could speak Spanish, but I couldn't understand the answers. And I finally realised I found a hotel. I was taken in, which was lovely. I went to the bedroom, which was a giant heart shape with a crimson cover, and I realised it was the local love hotel. that was used by all the local cocoa workers in the,
Nice,
surrounding
yeah.
fields. But it was a comfortable night, and I had no company.
I hope you have the Bible in the drawers out there.
Yeah, in fact, it's quite a tip if you're travelling in South America, allegedly.
Okay.
Because I mean, one of the tricks of the villains out there is to rip the bottom of your rucksack as you're walking along with a razor. So you should really put chicken wire in the bottom of your rucksack.
Okay.
And a Bible on the top, because they might have a. I don't believe this one, do you? But they might. they might have a conscience about raging because you're a holy man.
In some Unholy War, you talk about the relief of soldiers finishing their leave and going back to work in Afghanistan and other areas of conflict. Do you think enough is being done to help ex or current soldiers once they are pushed back into civilian life?
Well, there's two sort of major questions there. One is one aspect that is not fully understood by people who aren't in the forces, and that is their comradeship. And you never live life more than when you're on the edge, like I was when I was in South America.
Yeah.
And for the fighting soldier, for a large part of, because nobody else really understands what it's all about, apart from you and your mates. There is that aspect that civilians don't fully understand.
Sure.
That's one question. And they do actually, when you've got the upper hand, fighting is actually quite an adrenaline rush, as you might imagine.
I can imagine.
Especially when you win. It's not so good when you lose.
No.
But this is men being men and doing what men have to do, I guess. But the other aspect is which I touch on in the book, is post-traumatic stress syndrome or combat stress. And that can come at a deadly price. I mean, so many people in our prisons are ex-servicemen, on our streets are ex-servicemen. They do an awful lot for them. The regiments do, the SAS does, for instance, for its own time. But it's never enough, and you never know when it's going to come. A true story involved in some unholy war comes 25 years later after an incident in the Falklands. It was based on something that really happened.
Wow.
And it can do horrible things to people. You just never get rid of the nightmares. And what some of our troops and the American troops have been through is absolutely unbelievable, and it will haunt them for the rest of their lives. Apparently, you are less affected by this if you're fighting an enemy you know and recognise who's got a uniform on. This is from some recent research. It is far worse when you don't know who your enemy is, and one can imagine maybe why.
Yeah.
You're walking down the street, you don't know when it's going to explode in front of you, you don't know when the woman coming towards you might be carrying explosives in a vest under a burqa.
Yeah.
You never know where the enemy is, who he is.
And finally, this interview is being done at a time when a Tom Clancy novel, Jack Ryan, is in cinemas worldwide. Do you think the new generation of authors see it as an essential way to boost their popularity and really kickstart their way as an author?
New generation? No, this has been the writer's dream since time immemorial, since they invented the movie camera.
Really?
Oh, yes. As Graham Greene famously said, just take the money, I think it was Graham Greene, just take the money and run, because they're going to ruin it for you. I think probably because a book loses at least 60% of its content when turned into a film, it has to.
Yeah.
So it's probably better to somebody else does your script and cuts all the lovely bits out of your book when they translate it to film.
Yeah.
I think probably TV, and especially with the growing market of Sky, Netflix and other people who are moving into the... I think, in fact, guys like you will be at the forefront soon. And I think this is where the film industry will really start taking off in a new sort of way. Mm-hmm. But certainly everybody wants their book or turned into a film or TV production. In fact, I talked earlier about the TikTok man. Mm-hmm. That was just about to be made into a TV production. We were just about to sign on the dotted line when the Provisional IRA decided to sign their peace agreements. And it was dropped like a hot potato. Yeah. So that was going to be my pension.
Terence, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure, Simon. Thank you.
Thanks.